The night was supposed to be like any other, a dazzling gala filled with the elite of Washington, D.C., a place where power and influence flowed as easily as the champagne. But in a single moment, the entire atmosphere shifted. A well-known journalist, eager for a viral moment, stepped forward with a loaded question, his sights set on Kai Madison Trump. He expected hesitation. He expected a stumble. What he didn't expect was Barron Trump stepping in with a response so sharp, so composed that it turned the entire situation on its head. What happened next didn't just leave the journalist speechless, it left the entire room frozen in stunned silence. Because in just a few sentences, Barron didn't just defend his cousin, he dismantled the entire argument with cold, hard facts. Stay with me, because what you're about to witness is a masterclass in handling pressure, exposing bias, and shutting down an ambush with nothing but intelligence. The Washington, D.C. Philanthropy Gala was in full swing. The grand ballroom shimmered under the soft glow of towering chandeliers, casting golden light over an audience of the city's most influential figures. The hum of polite conversation mixed with the clinking of crystal glasses as waiters glided through the crowd, offering trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. It was an event where power moved in whispers, where business deals were struck over small talk, and where every handshake carried hidden weight. But for Kai Madison Trump, this was just another night in the public eye. Draped in an elegant evening gown, Kai moved gracefully through the crowd, flashing a poised smile as she greeted familiar faces, politicians, CEOs, media moguls. She had inherited the Trump family's commanding presence, but she wielded it in her own way, confident, yet effortlessly composed. Beside her stood her cousin, Barron Trump, his towering 6 feet 7 inches frame making him one of the most noticeable figures in the room. He wasn't one for the spotlight, but his presence was impossible to ignore. Unlike the guests around him, Barron wasn't here to impress anyone. He was simply observing, listening, taking in the energy of the room with his usual quiet confidence. But hidden among the glittering crowd, someone had a different agenda. Michael Reynolds, a journalist for the Daily Progressive, had been waiting for this moment. His reputation wasn't built on fair reporting. It was built on viral takedowns, sharp edits, and crafting controversy out of the smallest moments. And tonight, Kai Madison Trump was his target. Armed with a microphone, a camera crew subtly positioned nearby, and a pre-planned list of loaded questions, Reynolds was ready to ambush. His goal was simple: corner Kai into an answer that would make headlines. What he didn't know, however, was that he wasn't just facing Kai tonight. Barron Trump was about to turn the entire situation upside down. Michael Reynolds wasn't just any journalist, he was a master of the ambush, a man who had built his career on trapping high-profile figures in uncomfortable moments. His reporting wasn't about uncovering truth. It was about sensationalism, controversy, and clickbait headlines. And tonight he had one goal: to make Kai Madison Trump stumble on camera. For weeks, Reynolds had been planning this confrontation. He had studied her interviews, combed through old statements, and crafted a question so sharp, so loaded, that it would be nearly impossible to answer without backlash. His network was already prepared to run the footage the moment it went live, eager for a viral takedown of another Trump family member. As Kai finished a conversation with a senator, Reynolds saw his chance. He adjusted his tie, glanced toward his camera crew, who were already in position, and stepped forward with a smug grin, microphone in hand. "Kai Trump," he called out, his voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "Mind if I ask you a quick question about your family's role in philanthropy?" It was a perfectly innocent setup, one that no public figure could easily refuse without looking evasive. Kai, ever poised, turned toward him with a polite smile. "Of course," she said smoothly. Reynolds wasted no time. The trap was set. "Many believe that your family's wealth gives you an unfair advantage in philanthropy," he began, his tone measured but pointed. "How do you respond to accusations that the Trumps use charity events like this to boost their own public image rather than to actually help others?" The mood in the ballroom shifted instantly. The chatter faded, replaced by an eerie silence as nearby guests turned their attention to the exchange. The air grew heavy with anticipation. Kai's expression remained neutral, but in that split second, Reynolds saw what he was looking for, a flicker of hesitation. Got her, or so he thought, because before Kai could even respond, A deep, composed voice cut through the tension like a blade. With all due respect, Barron Trump stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Reynolds. Would you say the same thing about other philanthropists? Or is it just the Trump name that concerns you? A murmur rippled through the crowd. The dynamic had shifted in an instant. Reynolds hadn't planned for this, and what happened next? He never saw it coming. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd as Barron Trump took a step forward, his towering frame now fully facing Michael Reynolds. Unlike the journalist who stood with the false confidence of a man expecting an easy victory, Barron's posture was relaxed yet unshakable. Reynolds hesitated for the briefest moment. This wasn't part of his plan. His target was Kai Madison Trump, not Barron. But now, all eyes were locked on Donald Trump's youngest son, who had just turned the tables before the game had even begun. The journalist forced a smirk, gripping the microphone tighter. "Well," he said, quickly regaining his composure, "your family is known for prioritizing wealth and business over social issues, wouldn't you agree?" The question was another trap, one meant to push Barron into either defending his family's status or admitting to the privilege Reynolds was trying to highlight. But Barron didn't blink. He didn't rush. Instead, he calmly pulled his phone from his pocket, scrolled for a brief second, and then turned the screen toward Reynolds. Silence. On display was an article from Reynolds' own publication, The Daily Progressive, praising millions in Trump family donations to children's hospitals, veteran programs, and education initiatives. "Interesting perspective," Barron said smoothly, his voice carrying through the room, "since your own network seems to disagree with you." A murmur ran through the onlookers. Some exchanged glances, others smirked, waiting to see how Reynolds would recover. The journalist's face tightened. He hadn't expected a direct counterattack with receipts, but he wasn't about to back down. Shifting his weight, he pushed forward. "Regardless," he said quickly, "surely you understand the perception of privilege here. The Trump family has resources that ordinary Americans don't. Do you really think the playing field is fair?" This time, Kai Madison Trump stepped in. "Privilege is what you make of it," she said, her tone poised but sharp. "The real question is, what are you doing with your platform?" Reynolds's smirk faltered. Barron followed up effortlessly, his voice steady. "You say our resources give us an advantage, but isn't the goal of philanthropy to use what you have to help others? Shouldn't the real measure of impact be the results, not the name attached to them?" The room was now completely silent. No clinking glasses, no murmured conversations. Just a journalist who had walked in with all the power, now visibly losing control. And what happened next? It only got worse for him. For the first time that evening, Michael Reynolds looked uneasy. His plan was unraveling before his eyes. What was supposed to be a viral takedown of Kai Madison Trump had instead turned into Barron Trump calmly dismantling his entire argument, piece by piece. But Reynolds wasn't ready to give up just yet. "Well," he said, forcing a chuckle, "it's easy to talk about results when you come from a family that's had every advantage in life. Surely you can admit that, Barron." A classic deflection. When the facts weren't on his side, Reynolds did what many journalists in his position did, shift the focus back to privilege. But Barron didn't take the bait. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying Reynolds like he was the one under interrogation. Then, in that same measured tone, he responded, "Every person has unique opportunities. The real question is, what do they do with them?" Reynolds opened his mouth to respond, but Barron didn't give him the chance. "My cousin has worked hard in philanthropy and advocacy," Barron continued, gesturing toward Kai. "She could have chosen to do nothing. Instead, she's using her resources to make an impact. And I notice," he added with a pointed glance, "you're not asking that same question about any of the other wealthy donors in this room." A sharp murmur ran through the crowd. Reynolds shifted on his feet, gripping the microphone a little tighter. He could feel the momentum slipping away. He needed to regain control, fast. "But isn't it fair," Reynolds pushed, "to question whether your family's position shields you from the struggles that most Americans face?" Barron's response was immediate. "And isn't it fair," he countered smoothly, "to say that every person faces different challenges, whether you see them or not? You assume wealth eliminates hardship, but tell me, why is it so easy to dismiss people who are using their position to help others, yet so hard to question those who do nothing at all?" Reynolds froze. The audience was no longer just watching. They were engaged. The tides had completely turned, but Barron wasn't done yet. He reached into his pocket once again and pulled up another page on his phone. Verified statistics, real numbers, on Trump family contributions to hospitals, education, and veteran programs. He held it up for the cameras to see. "You say this is about privilege," Barron continued, his voice calm but deliberate. "Then why not focus on what's actually being done with it? Because if impact is what matters, then facts should speak louder than headlines." Reynolds was visibly flustered now. He tried to interject, to steer the conversation back in his favor, but it was too late. The audience wasn't just listening anymore, they were nodding, some exchanged glances. Others murmured in quiet agreement. And just like that, the journalist who came in thinking he had all the control was suddenly on the defensive. But what happened next? It would be the final blow. Michael Reynolds could feel it slipping away. The power, the control, the perfectly crafted moment he had been waiting for, it was all unraveling right in front of him. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The audience, once indifferent, was now on Barron Trump's side. Instead of trapping Kai Madison Trump in a scandalous soundbite, he had accidentally set the stage for Barron to take complete control of the conversation. Desperate to salvage what he could, Reynolds tried again. If logic and facts weren't working, he'd have to lean into emotion. "Well," he started, forcing a smirk, "you can talk about philanthropy and numbers all you want, but at the end of the day, the Trump name has been attached to countless controversies. Wouldn't you say that overshadows any so-called good deeds?" It was a bold move. Reynolds was betting on one thing: optics. The moment Barron got defensive, the moment he reacted emotionally, that was the moment the cameras would capture. But Barron wasn't playing his game. Instead, he simply blinked, as if considering the question. Then, his voice steady, he responded, "Every public figure, especially those who strive to make an impact, faces criticism. But tell me, Mr. Reynolds, does a headline matter more than real-world results?" Reynolds flinched. Barron took a step forward, just enough to close the space between them, but his voice remained calm. "You call them controversies, I call them challenges that come with standing for something." The tension in the room was now thick enough to cut with a knife. Still, Reynolds refused to back down. He scrambled for another angle. "Okay, but you have to admit, your family's wealth gives you an unfair advantage over the average American." Barron didn't miss a beat. "And isn't it fair to say that every person has unique opportunities, that it's not about what you're given, but what you do with it?" He let the words settle before adding, "You can stand on the sidelines and criticize, or you can use what you have to actually make a difference. Which one are you doing?" Reynolds' smirk vanished. A murmur ran through the crowd. The shift was palpable. People weren't just watching anymore. They were agreeing. For the first time, Reynolds had nothing to say. His plan to corner Kai Trump had backfired spectacularly, and now he was the one in the hot seat. And what happened next? It would be the final, crushing blow. The room was dead silent. Every pair of eyes in the ballroom was locked onto Barron Trump and Michael Reynolds. The journalist, once smug and self-assured, now stood frozen, microphone in hand, grasping for a way out. He had walked into this moment thinking he had the upper hand. He had expected a nervous, scripted response from Kai Madison Trump, a soundbite he could twist into a viral headline. Instead, he found himself being systematically dismantled, one fact at a time. And Barron wasn't finished. Calmly, he held up his phone one last time, displaying a list of verified statistics on Trump family charitable contributions. The numbers were undeniable. Millions donated to children's hospitals, veterans, and disaster relief. Cold, hard facts, irrefutable and devastating to Reynolds' argument. "You see, Mr. Reynolds," Barron said smoothly, "facts are stubborn things. You can twist a headline, you can cherry-pick a narrative, but at the end of the day, the truth doesn't change." Reynolds opened his mouth to respond, then hesitated. He had nothing. No counter, no spin, no witty retort. Barron took another step forward, his voice still controlled but carrying a weight that left no room for escape. "With influence comes responsibility," he said. "You have a platform, Mr. Reynolds. Do you use it to inform or to manipulate?" The journalist visibly tensed. He had spent his career putting others on the spot, forcing them to defend themselves under pressure. Now he was the one on trial. Barron tilted his head slightly. "So tell me," he said, his next words landing like a knockout punch. "Will you report this conversation fairly, or just the parts that get more clicks?" A sharp, collective murmur rippled through the crowd. That was it. The final crushing blow. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. His smirk was gone. The cameras were still rolling, but instead of capturing a viral takedown of the Trump family, they had just witnessed a journalist being completely outmatched in real time. And then, before Reynolds could even attempt to regain control, Kai Madison Trump stepped in. Placing a hand gently on Barron's arm, she gave a poised smile. "I think my cousin has made an excellent point," she said, gracefully delivering the final touch. "We welcome honest conversations, but fairness and respect should always come first." Reynolds had no way out. His plan had backfired spectacularly. He forced a tight smile, muttered a hasty, "Thank you for your time," and disappeared into the crowd, his once confident stride now stiff and awkward. The second he was gone, the ballroom erupted into applause. Several guests approached Barron, shaking his hand, commending him on his composure, his intelligence, and his ability to flip the narrative effortlessly. "That was impressive," one guest remarked. "You didn't just defend your cousin, you stood up for the truth." Kai smiled at Barron, a quiet sense of admiration in her expression. "You always know exactly what to say," Barron chuckled. "Sometimes the best way to respond to criticism is with facts, not emotion." And just like that, what was supposed to be a hit piece on the Trump family became a viral moment of its own. But the impact? That was only just beginning. The moment Michael Reynolds disappeared into the crowd, the energy in the ballroom shifted. What had started as a tense confrontation had turned into an undeniable victory. The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was filled with admiration. People murmured among themselves, recounting what they had just witnessed. But before the night had even ended, the real impact was already unfolding online. Guests discreetly pulled out their phones, and within minutes, clips of Barron Trump's exchange with Reynolds began circulating on social media. The video spread like wildfire, racking up millions of views within hours. Hashtags like #BarronShutsThemDown, #FactsOverFiction, and #MediaExposed surged to the top of trending lists. The reactions were overwhelming. People weren't just watching, they were analyzing, sharing, and praising the way Barron had flipped the entire situation against the journalist. This is how you handle media bias, with facts and composure. Journalist walked in thinking he had control, walked out completely wrecked. Barron Trump didn't just answer the questions, he exposed the entire game. Even mainstream media couldn't ignore what had happened. News segments began covering the viral moment, debating whether Reynolds had overstepped in his approach. Some outlets, typically critical of the Trump family, were forced to admit that Barron's calm and logical response had been unexpectedly impressive. Editorial pieces began surfacing, with one headline reading, "Perhaps we should have done more research before assuming the worst about the Trump family's philanthropy. Barron Trump's measured response is a reminder of the importance of fair journalism." But the real fallout was happening at the Daily Progressive, the very publication Reynolds worked for. The journalist, once known for his aggressive interview tactics, was suddenly under scrutiny. His own network faced backlash for what was seen as a clear attempt at a gotcha moment gone wrong. Within days, an internal statement quietly announced that Michael Reynolds was taking a leave of absence. Despite all the buzz, Barron Trump never addressed the moment again. He didn't need to. The video, the facts, and the public reaction spoke for themselves. Kai Madison Trump, however, did leave one final remark in an interview days later. "The truth has a way of revealing itself, whether the media wants it to or not." And just like that, what was meant to be a public embarrassment for the Trump family had become something entirely different. A lesson in composure, a lesson in truth, and a lesson in how one calm, well-prepared response can dismantle an entire narrative. The events of that night at the Washington D.C. Philanthropy Gala were supposed to play out differently. Michael Reynolds walked in expecting an easy takedown, a viral moment that would reinforce the media's favorite narrative. He had the questions planned, the cameras rolling, and the headlines practically written. But instead of trapping Kai Madison Trump, he ended up backing himself into a corner. What happened wasn't just a moment of quick thinking. It was a lesson in power, control, and the importance of keeping your composure under pressure. Barron Trump didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. With nothing but logic, facts, and sharp counter-arguments, he dismantled the journalist's entire strategy in real time. What was supposed to be an ambush turned into a humiliation, not for the Trump family, but for the journalist who underestimated them. In the days that followed, the video of the exchange spread like wildfire. Clips flooded every major social media platform. The world watched as a journalist known for his aggressive tactics was left speechless on camera. The media had no choice but to acknowledge what happened. Even the outlets that were typically hostile toward the Trumps were forced to give credit where it was due. Barron's response had been calm, logical, and devastatingly effective. But this wasn't just about one journalist's failed ambush. This moment exposed something bigger: the way media narratives are shaped, the way bias is disguised as journalism, and the way public perception is manipulated. Reynolds walked into that ballroom thinking he controlled the conversation. He walked out realizing that he never had control at all. Barron and Kai Trump never lost their cool. They didn't fall into the trap of defensiveness or outrage. They flipped the entire exchange around with nothing but composure and intelligence. And that's why this moment resonated with so many people. Because it wasn't just a win, it was a wake-up call, and now that wake-up call lives on. The video is still being shared, analyzed, and discussed. It's a reminder of something important. Control the conversation, or the conversation will control you. So what do you think? Did Barron Trump just deliver the ultimate masterclass in handling the media? Did this moment expose the flaws in confrontational journalism? Let us know in the comments. If you found this story eye-opening, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. More stories like this are coming your way. Breaking down the biggest moments, exposing media bias, and uncovering the stories that others don't want you to see. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an update, because as we've just seen, sometimes the truth doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs to be heard.